Alright, let's redo this same exercise that we did before, loading our KITTI file, and this time I'm going to load the whole original AVI, load AVI, and we have it here somewhere, KITTI eyes, there you go, let's load this one. So that one has about 600 and something frames, 613 frames altogether. Actually 614, since it goes from frame 0 to 613. And once we've loaded that, we got those 614 frames. And what I'd like to do is see what we did last time. We tracked the shape of the eye on the original, and it's rather shaky. And that's not always the best way to do it, not the simplest way, because if you need to do a lot of manual adjustment, it might be better to start by stabilizing this video. At least temporarily. You can later undo the camera motion and return back to the original if for any reason you really need it. But one thing that would help here is to have the eye not move too much by stabilizing the video altogether initially, before you then go to the curve and set your roto tools and keyframes and use the tracking assistant to find the shape of the eye. Now, so in this case, what I'll do is I'll zoom in just like before. Actually, no, we'll do that later. So right now I need to go stabilize this video, and I'm going to work on the whole 600 and something frames at 1280 by 1024. You can see it right there. Image info 1280 by 720. That's what the dimensions are of this particular video. Alright, so let's go and select the filter, animate it, and stabilize. That's where we do this. And of course, one thing you need to do is identify, let's close this quick, you need to identify an area that's not going to move off track, off the screen, and certainly this eye or this eye is a good candidate. And perhaps an area on there that's also not changing too much in color. You see, for instance, the upper corner of the eye here, that would not be a good one because it is changing as she's moving her eyes. You see the white portion of the eye there, that skin showing a little bit. Here it's not, and then here it's showing. So that could cause the tracker to be confused about where, what portion to track. So you want to make sure you find an area with a good amount of detail and yet something that's not moving too much. This area here around the nose is probably a good candidate. There's some brown, there's some white, there's a lot of little fine detail on the fur, and it's not changing. Okay, it's not fluffy where she's breathing and there's no movement on there. I mean, it's moving sideways a little bit, right? But other than that, it's pretty stable. You could probably also find something up here, right? One problem though is she's moving her head a little bit left to right. So that could be a little bit tricky, and maybe part of the image will be stabilized and then it jumps and then it's got another stabilized portion. That might still be okay. So let's go and try that. Let's in fact let's track this one here on the nose, or near the nose. So let's go to first frame and filter, animated, stabilize. And with the stabilizer, what you'll do first is select the tracking point. Right, so that's very similar to the automated tracker in the curve tool, and what you do is you indicate not a whole set of points like a curve, but just one point, and we'll go with this area here. Let's click right there, and what you see it did is created a red box and a light green box. The red box indicates the block size. What are we looking for to track? And then this one here, the outer one, indicates how far could it move from frame to frame. So this is the search area, where to look for this particular block. The block size you can set here up to 48 pixels across, and then here you can set the search area. And the bigger the search area, the longer it's gonna take to find it, to search. So if if there's not too much movement, too much sudden shaking, you could bring this down a little bit, but don't make it too small because it could potentially cause the next frame not to contain your search box and it might not find it. So you want to make sure you have sort of a middle ground. Try it, and if it doesn't find it, try again. The fudge factor, I can't speak to that too much quite yet. There's a tooltip that will give you some ideas on that. But there is an option here that you may want to look at, and then these two here, the border handling, how to handle the borders, and you could have it reconstruct but that's kind of a permanent thing. If you're not sure if you want to keep the motion and perhaps restore the camera motion later on, or undo this, you might want to actually keep it in repeat mode. So it kind of repeats or wraps the borders around. But one more option here is to remove the motion or to just move it to some extent. If you decide to smooth it, you can change how much of smoothing do you want. But in our case, we'd like to stabilize it as much as possible. So we'll go with remove motion, and hopefully that will just keep it as steady as it can. Now, because it's not actually steady totally, because she moves her head a little bit during the clip, we know it's going to fail at some point, and then find a new position, hopefully, to stabilize on. Alright, so let's go and take a look at that. So it's now processing that particular point and tracking it. This is going to take quite a while. We have 600 frames to go through and stabilize, and a fairly large search area for that block. So I'm going to just wait for that to complete, but I will probably accelerate it in the replay here for your video, and we'll perhaps play a little bit music behind that as well. Now, when it's done halfway, it's not only halfway, it's actually doing 2 passes. So you see now it's going a little bit faster on the second half of the processing. So you should probably keep an eye on these frame numbers up here, and you'll realize that in the middle of the taskbar it's actually done the analysis, and now it's, I think, doing sort of the processing of it and creating the new video based on it. So at that point, we have now a video that's a little bit more stable. You notice the nose is not moving much. The border, of course, is suffering from it, and that's to be expected. That's one of the side effects of doing image stabilization, unless you do then some reconstruction of it. But the nice thing of it, if you look at the eye here, it stays mostly in this same spot. It's not moving a whole lot. It does move a little bit because she did, after all, also move her head. So there is some motion on the object that we're tracking, and some rotational motion as well. But still, this is a good example of what you might get and why you might want to stabilize it before you go and track it. So now that we've done that, we can go and track it. So let's go again through the curve tool, which we have right there. Let's go and zoom in and identify, well, maybe this time we'll use this one here. Let's go and track this one. So I'm going to do let's do a tracking just of the iris right here, the black part. So let's go create a curve, and we'll start it down here, maybe a little bit on the outside, something like this. And then we'll do another point nearby. Now remember, it will latch on to the point that's already there if we click too close. So what you want to do is click on the outside and then bring it in. And then we can do that here too. And here we'll need 2 points as well. So let's bring one like that, 2 points close by, so we can have a strong curvature right there. And one more. And then here we'll do 2 points as well. This one needs to move over, and this one. And then we need to do one more and bring it here. Okay, so we can, and that's the curve we can close. So let's go close it, and perhaps do a little bit of fine tuning. Let's make sure the pupil stays on the curve stays on the inside of the eye. Something like this. Alright, and so we'll do the same thing as we did earlier, which is to keyframe it. That's our first, and we have a last keyframe automatically at the end. It moves a little bit, right? And so now we need to use the motion tracker assistant to tell it to go through finding where these points move to, right? So remember, we have the search boxes and we have the track, or the interest boxes, the area of interest boxes. Search box indicates how far they may have moved as we go from one frame to the other. The block size here indicates, you know, the size of the area of interest around each of the control points. So let's go do that, and hopefully it will be able to track it. We should be able to, well, it's behind the panel here, so we'll have to wait for that to go. But you can see the curve as it's moving, as the eye is moving left to right. The pupil is following it, and there will be a little bit of adjusting needed sometimes. It really depends on how good the quality the information, the video is that you're tracking. And so it's going through 400, 500 frames, another 100, and we'll go through the entire 600 frames. Ah, there is one here that it lost. It found it latched onto another point of very similar shape. So we will need to go and adjust that. You see here, did a good job here, but then occasionally that's where you'll need to redo that. And you know, things that can throw it off is, for instance, you got a piece of hair here right in front that came from her tail, and it's maybe that or some other areas are changing in very similar in color, and it's just drifting off. So when you have colors, when you have areas that are not showing much detail, it's a bit more difficult to track. One thing you could do is perhaps not force it to create keyframes on every frame. See, right now I have a changing curve on every frame. So let me undo that and retry. I'm going to go clear the keyframes. I still keep the curve at the very beginning, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with the motion tracker assistant again. Wait, actually I want to see what's happening, so I'm going to move it to the side, right, so we can actually see the curve, and then go to the motion tracker assistant right there and set the block size fairly big. I think I need the block size big because there are not a lot of details in these blocks. And the search box, we don't need a whole lot because it's not moving too far, so we can do that. But one parameter here, you see the keyframe every 1 frames, we don't need that. Maybe we can go every 5 or every 10. And so that would allow us to perhaps produce fewer keyframes and therefore less work to do some tidy up, some cleanup later on. Alright, let's go try that. Let's give it 10. Every 10 frames we want a keyframe. Now, of course, that means also that it's not going to be a perfect match for the curve if there is suddenly some very big moves. Okay, so we'll judge that after we've seen it. Because right now here, whenever we see it off, it's showing the next frame before it shows the curve on it. It's not showing it after it's detected it. So the curve will be off. Oh, there's one that jumps to the side. But see, that's the nice thing, is that we won't have to fix that for every frame, because we're setting a keyframe only every 10. So when you have some fairly poor material you're tracking, like look at that, there's barely any details, that's to be expected. It's not going to be able to track it too well. And therefore you're going to need to do a little bit of manual adjusting here, corrective work. Alright, so let's see what we got here. There you go, it tracks it pretty nicely, and then here somewhere, yep, there it jumps around. So we got one curve here, and we need to find where that keyframe is. Yeah, there's a lot of changes here. So in cases like these, you're going to need to go and adjust these, right? Grab the points, and perhaps also if you see them move out a little bit into the area where you don't want to track or you don't want to do any changes, you can do these and set the keyframes right there, right? And then you can adjust, you can advance one. Oh, there was a keyframe actually, so that's the one we need to move, right? So here's one like so. And maybe this is something that it really helps to have a tablet also. I think it's a little bit faster than using the mouse and clicking each of these points, but either way it's going to be a little bit of corrective, and it's nice because you can actually really say which way you want it, right? And then you can go to this one, and where's the next keyframe? You got 10 to go, right, before you reach the next one. You can actually adjust here, you can increase the width of your slide bar so you get a little bit more detail, more resolution. So you go to a keyframe like this one and move this here and this here. Alright, move this one up, this one in, and so on. And don't forget to keyframe it. There's the rotor tools, keyframe it. And then go to the next one. Where's the next keyframe? There's one. Oh, hold on, one more. There. Alright, let's get this one. So you see what I'm saying? You basically have an advantage now in the sense that you only set keyframe one out of 10 frames, right? And so you don't have to go correct these misfires in every case. And then you have another one here, right? Set this one here, drag this one, there you go. Okay, keyframe. And so now you see that it's actually doing a better job. We only have a couple of keyframes to correct. There's a few more, and basically all of these here were misfires. And that's really to be expected when you have data that's not trackable, because when you look at this magnified like this, you can really see there's hardly any detail, and our track box, our block size, was too small to find any significant differentiation or identification of the block amongst others. So that's unfortunately here an example I picked that's not a really good one to track automatically. You can use the automatic tracking assistant as a starter and then simply finish it with the manual approach here and create a keyframe there. Oh, I should actually stick with just the ones that are already keyframes rather than adding more, and I still need to fix those. Okay, so there we go. Okay, keyframe this one, and there you go. So that's the technique that you can use when the tracking is not perfect, because the video underneath it that you are tracking is a bit iffy. It's not a very high detailed piece of video. You know, if you were to track something like the nose here, there's much more detail and it's much easier to track and to identify exactly where the points need to stay. Alright, well, hopefully that will give you some ideas on how to work with that motion tracker assistant as well.